relationship.
Got a girl in between. I don't need to do a mother thing. I'm begging me
They say reality TV is never just entertainment, it's a pressure cooker. And on this night, that pressure exploded in a way nobody was ready for. The cameras were rolling, the room was packed, and tensions that had been simmering for months finally boiled over. Fans thought they were tuning in for another messy argument, maybe a few sharp words and eye rolls. But what happened next? It left everyone stunned, replaying the footage again and again, asking the same question: did that really just happen? Because according to the tape that has everyone talking, Sierra didn't just argue with Yandy, she snapped. Voices echoed through the room as accusations flew like daggers. Old secrets resurfaced, loyalty was questioned, and the energy shifted from shady to straight-up explosive. Witnesses say you could feel it in the air, that moment when words were no longer enough. Emotions ran high, tempers flared, and before security could even react, chaos erupted. 1 second, it was finger-pointing and raised voices. The next, a scream cut through the room. Gasps followed. And then, shockingly, hands reached out, wigs shifted, and history was made in a split second that fans will never forget. Social media immediately lit up, with viewers arguing over who crossed the line first and who pushed things too far. Some say Sierra was provoked beyond her limit. Others insist Yandy never saw it coming. What makes this clash even more intense is the history between them. This wasn't just a random blow-up. This was layered with betrayal, jealousy, and long-standing resentment that had been ignored for far too long. Friends stood frozen, allies picked sides, and just like that, a room full of familiar faces was divided. Fans are shocked, not just by the physical moment everyone's replaying, but by what it represents. Was this about respect, power, pride, or was it the inevitable result of unresolved tension that finally reached its breaking point? Stay right here, because this story goes way deeper than what the tape shows. What led up to that explosive moment? What was said behind closed doors that pushed Sierra over the edge? And how did Yandy respond once the dust settled? This is the clash everyone is talking about, and we're just getting started. The room felt heavy before anyone even spoke, like the air itself knew something ugly was about to happen. You could hear heels clicking against the floor, nervous laughter fading into silence, eyes darting from one face to another. Sierra stood near the edge of the room, arms crossed tight against her chest, jaw clenched so hard it looked like it might crack. Yandy was across from her, calm on the surface, but anyone who really knew her could tell by the way her fingers kept adjusting her jacket that she was already irritated. This wasn't just another group gathering. This was unfinished business walking into the room wearing lashes, attitude, and years of resentment. People tried to act normal at first. Small talk floated around, fake smiles were exchanged, but the tension was undeniable. Fans watching later would say they felt it through the screen, like a slow drumbeat getting louder with every passing second. Sierra hadn't planned to explode tonight. At least, that's what she told herself. She came in determined to keep it cute, to keep it classy, to say her piece and move on. But the problem with buried feelings is they don't stay buried when someone keeps stepping on the same nerve. Yandy finally broke the silence, her voice smooth but sharp around the edges. She looked directly at Sierra and said she was tired of the whispers, tired of the side comments, tired of people acting fake and then running to blogs. The room froze. Sierra's eyes narrowed immediately. She asked who Yandy was talking about, even though everyone already knew. Yandy shrugged, that small dismissive gesture that drives people crazy, and said if the shoe fit, wear it. That was the spark. Sierra stepped forward, her voice rising as she said she was done being painted like the villain when she'd been nothing but honest. She accused Yandy of playing both sides, of smiling in her face while secretly undermining her behind closed doors. Gasps rippled through the room. Someone muttered that things were about to get ugly. Emotions ran high as old wounds were ripped open, ones that had never really healed. Yandy fired back, her calm slipping as she said Sierra loved to play victim and rewrite history. She reminded everyone of past moments when she had supported Sierra, defended her, even protected her from backlash. Sierra laughed bitterly, a sound full of hurt and disbelief, and said support shouldn't come with strings attached. She accused Yandy of keeping score, of using loyalty as a weapon. The words cut deep, and you could see it on Yandy's face. Voices overlapped as others jumped in, trying to mediate, trying to calm things down, but it only added fuel to the fire. One friend told them both to breathe, to remember where they were. Another whispered that cameras were everywhere. But in that moment, neither Sierra nor Yandy cared. Years of bottled-up resentment were pouring out, and there was no stopping it now. Sierra brought up a moment from months ago, something that had been brushed off at the time but clearly never forgotten. She said Yandy had embarrassed her publicly, questioning her integrity in front of people who already doubted her. Yandy rolled her eyes and said she was just speaking her truth. That phrase hit Sierra like a slap. She shouted that truth without compassion was just cruelty, and that Yandy knew exactly what she was doing. The room erupted. People talked over each other, alliances formed in real time, and the family was left divided. Some stood closer to Yandy, nodding along, while others hovered near Sierra, whispering encouragement. Fans would later analyze every frame, every facial expression, trying to figure out who was really in the wrong. But in that moment, there was no right or wrong, only anger and pride colliding head-on. Yandy took a step closer, her voice firm as she said she refused to be disrespected in her own space. Sierra matched her movement instantly, closing the distance, her hands shaking now. She said respect was a two-way street and she was done being quiet to keep the peace. Someone tried to step between them, but they brushed past, eyes locked, neither willing to back down. The argument took a darker turn when Sierra mentioned family. She accused Yandy of dragging personal matters into public conversations, of crossing lines that should never be crossed. Yandy snapped back that family wasn't off limits when people were lying and manipulating narratives. The word manipulating hung in the air, heavy and dangerous. Sierra's breathing grew faster, her chest rising and falling as she tried to steady herself. Fans are shocked when they hear what came next. Sierra said she felt set up, like every move she made was being watched, judged, and twisted. She said she couldn't trust anyone in the room, especially not Yandy. Yandy's face hardened as she replied that trust was earned, not demanded, and that Sierra had burned too many bridges. That was when the room went silent again, the kind of silence that signals a breaking point. For a brief second, it looked like Sierra might walk away. She turned her head, glanced toward the door, and everyone held their breath. But then Yandy muttered something under her breath, something only a few people close enough could hear. Whatever it was, it stopped Sierra in her tracks. She spun around, eyes blazing, and demanded Yandy repeat herself. Yandy didn't hesitate. She repeated it louder this time, her tone unapologetic. The words hit Sierra like gasoline on a flame. Her hands clenched into fists, and she stepped forward again, completely unfiltered now. She said she had swallowed her pride too many times, stayed silent to protect other people's images, and she was done. The emotional conflict was written all over her face, pain mixing with rage. Others started shouting for them to stop, to chill, to think about what they were doing. Someone reached for Sierra's arm, but she shrugged them off. Yandy stood her ground, chin lifted, refusing to be intimidated. The stare down felt endless, like time had slowed just to savor the chaos. Fans watching later would say this was the moment everything changed, the point of no return. Sierra's voice cracked as she spoke again, revealing just how deeply hurt she was. She said she felt betrayed by someone she once considered family. Yandy scoffed at the word family, saying family doesn't move the way Sierra moved. That cut deeper than any insult. Sierra's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall, and she took one more step forward, closing the gap completely. You could hear someone yell for security, but they were too late. Words were no longer enough. Emotions had completely taken over, and the energy in the room shifted from confrontational to explosive. The argument had escalated beyond control, and everyone could feel it. The tape that would later circulate online captured every second, every gasp, every scream, as the situation spiraled toward a moment that would leave fans debating for weeks. Sierra lifted her hand, not to strike, but to gesture emphatically as she spoke, her movements sharp and aggressive. Yandy leaned back slightly, her expression a mix of anger and disbelief, as if she couldn't believe it had gone this far. Someone tried again to step in, but the crowd was too tight, the chaos too loud. And just as it seemed like the argument might finally burn itself out, just as a few people thought they saw Sierra hesitate, everything tipped over the edge, carrying the room with it into a storm that no one could stop, and it all continued without pause as the confrontation pushed forward, louder, messier, and far more intense than anyone had imagined. And in that split second where hesitation flickered and disappeared, the situation escalated beyond anything words could control. The crowd surged instinctively, people shifting, chairs scraping the floor as bodies pressed closer, trying to see and trying to stop what was unfolding at the same time. Sierra's hand dropped back to her side, but her body language screamed that she was past the point of reason. Yandy's jaw tightened, her eyes locked on Sierra with a mix of disbelief and fury, like she was daring her to go one step further. Someone shouted Sierra's name, another voice yelled Yandy's, but neither of them heard it. They were locked inside their own emotional storms, replaying months, even years, of slights and betrayals in real time. Sierra accused Yandy of always needing control, of manipulating situations so she could look innocent while others took the fall. Yandy snapped back that Sierra was reckless, that she burned bridges and then cried when she had nowhere left to stand. The words hit like punches. Sierra laughed again, that hollow laugh that comes when someone feels completely misunderstood. She said Yandy loved to talk about accountability but never owned her own part in anything. Yandy clapped back instantly, saying she owned her truth every single day, unlike Sierra who hid behind emotions whenever she was called out. Fans are shocked when they hear how personal it got, how quickly the argument moved from surface-level shade to deep character assassination. People in the room started choosing sides more openly now. One woman stepped closer to Yandy, nodding in agreement, whispering that Sierra was out of line. Another grabbed Sierra's hand, telling her she had every right to speak her truth. The family was left divided, friendships cracking under the pressure of the moment. Even those who tried to stay neutral felt pulled into the chaos, forced to react. Sierra suddenly brought up a private conversation she claimed Yandy had begged her not to repeat. The room went quiet again, everyone sensing danger. Yandy's eyes widened slightly as she warned Sierra not to do that, her voice low and serious. Sierra hesitated for half a second, then said she was tired of protecting people who wouldn't protect her. She revealed just enough to cause shock without fully exposing the secret, and it sent a ripple of gasps through the crowd. Yandy exploded, her calm completely shattered as she shouted that Sierra was foul for even hinting at that some things were off limits no matter how angry you were. Sierra fired back that Yandy should have thought about that before pushing her to this point. Emotions ran high as the argument turned into a battle over morality, loyalty, and lines that should never be crossed. Security finally appeared at the edges of the room, unsure when to intervene. They watched closely, waiting for a clear signal, but the situation was still technically verbal. Sierra paced back and forth now, running her hands through her hair, her breathing uneven. Yandy stood rigid, arms crossed, her expression hardened into something cold and unforgiving. Then came the moment that fans still argue about. Yandy shook her head slowly and said Sierra was embarrassing herself. Not yelling, not screaming, just a calm, cutting sentence delivered like a blade. Sierra stopped pacing. She turned slowly, eyes wide, and asked Yandy who she thought she was talking to. Yandy didn't back down. She repeated it, louder this time, saying Sierra was making a spectacle and proving everyone's point. That was when something snapped. Sierra stepped forward so fast people barely had time to react. The space between them vanished in an instant. Someone screamed no, another person lunged forward, but it was chaos now. Sierra reached out, her hand connecting with Yandy's hair as voices erupted around them. The room exploded into screams, shock, and movement as security rushed in. Fans are shocked by how fast it happened, how one moment turned into the next without warning. Yandy cried out in surprise, stumbling back as hands grabbed at both women, pulling them apart. Sierra shouted that she was tired of the disrespect, her voice cracking as she struggled against the people holding her back. Yandy yelled back that Sierra had crossed a line she could never uncross. The crowd was in full panic. People shouted for calm, for space, for cameras to stop rolling. Some tried to shield Yandy, others rushed to Sierra, telling her to breathe, to stop fighting. Security finally managed to separate them completely, positioning themselves between the two as they continued to hurl accusations across the room. Yandy adjusted herself, her hands shaking as she fixed her hair, her face flushed with anger and humiliation. She looked at Sierra with pure disbelief, asking how it ever got to this point. Sierra screamed back that Yandy pushed her there, that she had been poking and provoking for too long. Tears streamed down Sierra's face now, the adrenaline crashing into raw emotion. The room buzzed with reactions. Some people defended Sierra, saying anyone would have snapped under that pressure. Others sided firmly with Yandy, calling the move unforgivable. Fans watching later would pause the footage frame by frame, debating intent, provocation, and responsibility. But in that moment, there was no debate, only aftermath. Yandy shouted that she was done, that there was no coming back from this. She said she had tried to be the bigger person too many times, and she refused to be disrespected like that. Sierra sobbed, yelling that nobody ever listened to her until she lost control. The emotional conflict spilled out in messy, heartbreaking fragments that made the situation even more intense. Security escorted Yandy toward the door as she continued to shout over her shoulder, warning Sierra to stay away from her. Sierra tried to follow, but her friends held her back, wrapping their arms around her as she collapsed into tears. The family was left divided in the physical sense now, separated by walls and distance, not just opinions. As Yandy disappeared down the hallway, the room fell into a strange silence, broken only by Sierra's sobs and whispered conversations. People checked their phones already, knowing clips would be everywhere within minutes. Fans are shocked not just by the physical altercation, but by the emotional wreckage left behind. Sierra sank into a chair, her face buried in her hands, repeating that she didn't mean for it to go that far. Her friends tried to comfort her, telling her she was human, telling her emotions ran high. But even they looked shaken, unsure of what this would mean going forward. Reputations, relationships, and futures all felt suddenly uncertain. Outside, Yandy paced back and forth, surrounded by her own circle, venting her anger through clenched teeth. She said she felt violated, disrespected, and done. She swore she would never film another scene with Sierra again. Her voice trembled with rage as she replayed the moment over and over, unable to believe it actually happened. And as both women sat on opposite sides of the building, surrounded by people but completely isolated in their own pain, the fallout had only just begun, with accusations, loyalties, and consequences waiting to crash down next without pause, dragging everyone involved deeper into the drama that refused to settle. The silence didn't last long. It never does after something like that. Whispers started first, low and frantic, people replaying the moment out loud as if saying it enough times would make it make sense. Sierra sat hunched over, mascara streaking down her face, shaking her head again and again like she was trying to wake up from a nightmare. Every few seconds she muttered that she didn't mean it, that she just snapped, that nobody understood how far she'd been pushed. Her friends hovered around her, torn between comforting her and quietly worrying about what this meant for all of them. On the other side of the hallway, Yandy's anger began to harden into something colder. She stopped pacing and stood still, arms crossed, staring straight ahead. One of her friends dabbed at her hair gently, checking to make sure everything was in place, but Yandy flinched at the touch. She said she felt exposed, embarrassed, disrespected in a way she never expected. Emotions ran high as she demanded to know how things had escalated so fast, how someone she once defended could turn on her like that. Security stayed posted between the two groups, making it clear there would be no second round. Producers whispered urgently into their phones, already anticipating the fallout. Everyone knew this wasn't just a moment that would fade away. This was the kind of incident that would split alliances, dominate conversations, and follow everyone involved for a long time. Sierra finally looked up, her eyes red and swollen, and asked quietly if Yandy was okay. The question hung in the air, fragile and complicated. One of her friends snapped back that it was too late for that now. Sierra flinched, guilt washing over her face. She said she never wanted to hurt Yandy physically, that she only wanted to be heard. Fans are shocked when they hear this part, because it shows how quickly anger can override intention. Meanwhile, Yandy was telling her side of the story in rapid bursts, her voice shaking with restrained fury. She said she felt betrayed not just by Sierra, but by anyone who stood by and let it happen. She accused certain people of enjoying the chaos, of waiting for her to be humbled. The family was left divided even further as names were mentioned, fingers pointed, and old resentments resurfaced. Someone suggested they all sit down and talk it out later. Yandy laughed bitterly and said there was nothing to talk about. She said some lines couldn't be uncrossed, and that physical disrespect changed everything. Her friends nodded, backing her up, telling her she had every right to walk away. The word walk away echoed ominously, hinting at consequences that went far beyond this one night. Back in the main room, Sierra tried to explain herself again, her words tumbling over each other. She said she felt constantly judged, constantly painted as unstable, and that Yandy's comment about embarrassment hit her deepest insecurity. She admitted she felt small in that moment, cornered and dismissed. One friend gently told her that feelings didn't justify actions. Sierra broke down again, sobbing that she knew that now. Phones buzzed non-stop as clips began circulating online. Even before anyone officially addressed what happened, fans were already choosing sides. Some comments defended Sierra, saying she was provoked and emotionally overwhelmed. Others condemned her, saying nothing excuses putting hands on someone. Emotions ran high not just in the room, but across timelines everywhere. Yandy eventually agreed to sit down with producers, her voice steadier now but no less firm. She said she wanted it on record how violated she felt. She described the moment in detail, her shock, her disbelief, the humiliation of it happening on camera. She said trust was broken in a way she didn't know how to repair. Her words were calm, but the pain underneath them was unmistakable. Sierra was asked to give her account too. She wiped her face, took a deep breath, and tried to speak clearly. She admitted she lost control. She said she regretted it instantly. She also said she felt pushed to the edge by repeated jabs and dismissive behavior. As she spoke, her voice cracked again, revealing how raw the emotional conflict still was. People around them reacted differently. Some felt sympathy for both women, seeing two strong personalities collide in the worst possible way. Others felt anger, disappointment, even fear about what this incident meant for the group dynamic. The family was left divided not just emotionally, but strategically, as people started thinking about where they stood and who they could trust. Later that night, Yandy prepared to leave. As she gathered her things, she said she needed space, time to think, time to cool off. She made it clear she wasn't ready to forgive or forget. Her friends promised to support her no matter what decision she made. As she walked out, cameras caught her wiping away a tear she had been holding back all night. Sierra watched from a distance, her heart sinking as she realized the weight of what she'd done. She whispered that she wished she could take it back. Her friends told her all she could do now was own it and face whatever came next. But even they sounded unsure, aware that apologies don't always fix everything. The aftermath lingered heavy in the air long after the room emptied. People replayed conversations, wondering what could have been said differently, what moment might have changed the outcome. Fans are shocked by how many warning signs there were, how the tension had been building for so long without resolution. As the night finally wound down, one thing was clear to everyone involved. This wasn't just a heated clash. It was a turning point. Relationships had shifted, trust had cracked, and nothing would feel the same going forward. And without any real pause, the story continued to unravel, pulling in past grievances, future consequences, and choices that would only make the drama deeper and more complicated from here. The next morning didn't bring clarity, it brought consequences. Messages flooded in before sunrise, some supportive, some brutal, all demanding answers. Sierra woke up with a pounding headache and a pit in her stomach, the events of the night before replaying in fragments that made her flinch every time she closed her eyes. She scrolled through her phone slowly, watching opinions pile up faster than she could process them. Fans are shocked, some defending her pain, others calling her actions unforgivable. Every comment felt heavier than the last. Across town, Yandy sat quietly at her kitchen table, untouched coffee growing cold in front of her. She hadn't slept much. Every time she drifted off, she saw it again, felt it again, that moment of disbelief turning into anger. She wasn't crying anymore. That phase had passed. What replaced it was resolve. She told herself she would not minimize what happened, not for cameras, not for peace, not for anyone. Calls started coming in from mutual friends, producers, people asking how she was feeling, what she wanted to do next. Yandy answered selectively, her voice controlled, measured. She said she was hurt, she was angry, and she needed space. She made it clear she would not be pressured into a fake reconciliation just to keep things moving. Emotions ran high even in those quiet conversations, because everyone knew this situation had reached a level that couldn't be brushed aside. Sierra, meanwhile, debated whether to issue a public apology. Her friends advised caution, warning her that anything she said could make things worse. Others urged her to speak from the heart, to own her mistake fully. The family was left divided even in these discussions, opinions clashing about accountability versus self-preservation. Sierra felt paralyzed, torn between wanting to explain herself and fearing she would only dig a deeper hole. By midday, clips from the incident were everywhere. Slowed down, zoomed in, analyzed frame by frame. Fans dissected facial expressions, body language, tone. Some claimed Yandy provoked it. Others said Sierra crossed an unforgivable line. The narrative shifted depending on who was telling the story, and that chaos only intensified the emotional strain on everyone involved. Yandy finally broke her silence online with a short statement. She said she was taking time to process what happened and asked for respect and privacy. She didn't name Sierra directly, but the message was clear. She emphasized that physical boundaries matter and that no level of anger justifies crossing them. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Support poured in, reinforcing her decision to stand firm. Sierra watched the reactions roll in and felt a mix of guilt and defensiveness. She agreed with the message in theory, but her heart still ached with the feeling that her pain had been dismissed leading up to that moment. She recorded and deleted multiple videos, unable to find the right words. Every attempt sounded either too defensive or too weak. Later that afternoon, a small group meeting was called with people closest to both women, minus the cameras. The hope was to de-escalate, to figure out next steps before things spiraled further. Yandy arrived composed but distant, her guard fully up. Sierra arrived visibly anxious, her hands trembling as she took a seat across the room. The space between them felt wider than ever. No one spoke at first. Finally, Sierra cleared her throat and apologized. Not a dramatic speech, just a quiet admission that she was wrong for putting her hands on Yandy. She said she regretted it deeply. The room held its breath. Yandy listened without interrupting, her expression unreadable. When Sierra finished, Yandy nodded slowly and said she appreciated the apology, but that didn't mean things were okay. She explained that the incident reopened old wounds she'd worked hard to heal. She said trust had been broken in a fundamental way and she didn't know if it could be repaired. Her voice wavered for the first time, revealing the emotional cost beneath her composure. Fans are shocked when they hear how deeply it affected her sense of safety and respect. Sierra tried to explain her mindset, not to excuse herself but to give context. She talked about feeling dismissed, talked over, and constantly portrayed as unstable. She admitted she needed to work on how she handled conflict. Yandy listened, arms crossed, absorbing every word. When she responded, she said pain doesn't give anyone the right to cause pain. The statement landed hard, leaving Sierra in tears again. Others in the room reacted differently. Some sympathized with both sides, acknowledging the buildup of tension that led to the explosion. Others leaned firmly toward Yandy, emphasizing that physical escalation changes everything. The family was left divided yet again, each person grappling with their own interpretation of accountability and forgiveness. The meeting ended without resolution. No hugs, no promises, just an understanding that time and distance were necessary. Yandy left first, her shoulders squared, her steps steady. Sierra remained behind, staring at the floor, feeling the full weight of her actions settle in. In the days that followed, the ripple effects continued. Invitations were declined, group chats went silent, alliances shifted quietly. Fans continued to debate endlessly, some demanding consequences, others calling for compassion. Emotions ran high across every platform, fueled by speculation and incomplete information. Sierra eventually posted her apology. It was raw, imperfect, and clearly emotional. She took responsibility, acknowledged her mistake, and said she was seeking help to better manage her emotions. The response was mixed. Some praised her accountability. Others said it was too late. Yandy did not respond publicly. Privately, Yandy focused on protecting her peace. She leaned on her inner circle, avoided spaces where she felt unsafe, and set firm boundaries. She said she refused to let the incident define her, but she also refused to minimize it. Her stance earned both admiration and criticism, but she stood by it. As weeks passed, the initial shock faded, replaced by deeper questions. Could the group ever function the same way again? Was forgiveness possible, or had the damage gone too far? Fans are shocked by how one moment reshaped so many relationships, exposing fractures that had been hidden for years. And just when it seemed like things might finally settle, new conversations began, old clips resurfaced, and unresolved issues bubbled back up, proving that this clash was not an ending but a catalyst, pushing everyone involved toward choices and confrontations that would only intensify as the story moved forward without slowing down. And now it's your turn, because this story doesn't end here, it lives and breathes in every reaction, every opinion, and every conversation that follows. You've heard the build-up, you've witnessed the explosion, and you've felt the aftermath ripple through every relationship involved. But the biggest question still hangs in the air, unanswered and uncomfortable. Who was really pushed to the edge, and who crossed a line that can never be uncrossed? As a viewer, you're not just watching drama, you're judging it, feeling it, and taking sides whether you realize it or not. Maybe you felt your heart break for Sierra as she unraveled under pressure, finally snapping after feeling ignored and dismissed for far too long. Or maybe you felt anger rise in your chest for Yandy, seeing someone you respect be physically disrespected in a moment that should never have gone that far. Emotions ran high for a reason, because this wasn't simple, and it wasn't black and white. Think about it. How many times have you seen tension brushed off until it exploded? How many times have people been told to stay calm, stay quiet, be the bigger person, until they simply couldn't anymore? And on the other side, how many times have you believed that no matter the provocation, some actions are simply unacceptable? This clash forces you to confront those questions head-on, whether you're ready or not. Fans are shocked because this wasn't just a messy argument, it was a mirror. It reflected ego, pain, pride, loyalty, and the cost of unresolved conflict. It showed how quickly words can turn into actions, and how 1 second can change everything. The family was left divided, not just on screen, but in the minds of everyone watching. And that division won't disappear overnight. So now ask yourself, if you were in that room, where would you have stood? Would you have stepped in, or frozen in shock? Would you have defended your friend no matter what, or called them out even when it hurt? These are the questions that keep this story alive long after the cameras stop rolling. And let's be real, this isn't the last chapter. There are still consequences unfolding, conversations happening behind closed doors, and decisions being made that could change everything going forward. Will there ever be forgiveness? Will distance turn into permanent separation? Or will time soften the anger enough for accountability and healing to exist in the same space? Nobody knows yet, and that uncertainty is exactly why this moment matters. If this story made you feel something, if it made you pause, rewind, or argue with your screen, then don't stay silent. Your voice is part of the conversation now. Drop your thoughts in the comments and tell us where you stand. Was Sierra pushed too far, or did she lose control in a way that can't be justified? Was Yandy protecting her boundaries, or did her words cut deeper than she realized? There's no single answer, only perspectives, and yours matters. Make sure you hit like if this breakdown kept you locked in from start to finish. It helps keep these stories alive and these conversations going. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss the next chapter, because if you think this was intense, trust us, the fallout is just getting started. And turn on notifications so you're the first to know when new updates drop, because in stories like this, everything can change overnight. This is more than gossip, it's a look at what happens when emotions are ignored, when pride takes over, and when respect is tested in the harshest way. Stay tuned, stay engaged, and stay ready, because the next move hasn't been made yet, and when it is, you'll want to be right here to see it unfold.